Yeah, we're gonna watch this one. This one seems interesting. I think this will be the first of today. This might be funny or really odd. Anyways, Asian racism is built different than your average. Asian racism is built different than your average racism by fat little Asian man. I have a question. First of all, what is average racism? And second of all, how is it built different? We'll just jump in and see if it actually is built different. I would understand if it was the sister who's only 14. What? That's crazy. True. We'll jump in.
Hi, I'm just a fat little Asian man, and as a
We're gonna start this video like that, huh?
fat little Asian man, you can bet I've had my fair share of racism around the world. But I've gotta say, white people racism is probably the most boring and bland. Kinda like their seasoning. I mean,
they are getting more creative. They are getting more creative. I mean, mayonnaise monkey, bleach demon. There were a bunch of other things. Mayo moon crickets. That was one. That was one. We are getting more creative.
always either the Asian eyes or can you speak the English please?
It's that what he means. It's white people to Asians, and not people to others to white people. Okay. Yeah. We're kind of boring.
So uncreative. I think the only time somebody even tried was this one time during my stay in Australia. I was at a supermarket getting some tasty ramen noodles when the cashier looked at the ramen and looked at me, then said, "Of course, noodles."
Beasley funny, service is kind of slow. Guy has attitude, which adds to the insult. 7.2 out of 10 would be ridiculed again. Moon crickets, it's for me. Yeah.
Honestly, I couldn't even be mad. It was pretty funny, and I'd give it a nice 7.2 out of 10. Maybe it's because I'm used to Asian racism, where it's not enough to just insult your race, they have to insult your ancestors too. I've seen so many videos where people act surprised that there's racism in countries like Korea and Japan.
Why are people surprised? Why are people surprised? Considering that racism is everywhere. Like everywhere. Everywhere. Tribalism in general is everywhere. Like, don't ask his fans to call him Vanilla Gorilla. He would like it. True Vanilla Gorilla, that was also one.
Honestly, completely baffles me. Asia is not some sort of exotic utopia where racism doesn't exist. It's arguably worse. Racism here is on a different level. We Asians can be racist to people who look identical. Don't believe me? East Asians all hate each other.
It's true. But I think that this is also a cultural thing, right? Or like a historical thing, right? Because like the Chinese and the Japanese were always at each other's throats, kind of.
Indians and Pakistanis are mortal enemies. Thais look down on Burmese. Vietnamese and Cambodians dislike each other. Of course.
We know. They started bombarding each other. We know. We know.
Of course, Asian racism might not be as systemic or historic like Western racism was, but I think in terms of racist encounters in everyday life, there's definitely more here. Why? Let's take a look together. Before we take a look at Asian racism, let's review a little bit about our classic Western racism first, to really understand how Asian racism is different. In my understanding, Western racism can be divided into three ideas: exploitation, pseudoscience, and institutions. Racism in the West wasn't always so complex. Honestly, aside from the sprinkles of anti-Semitism here and there, racism didn't really take off until the 16th century.
But Jews aren't a race. Anti-Semitism is the hate against Jews, specifically just Jews, right? Not a race-based one, but a faith-based one. I mean, sometimes the people don't care and intertwine these.
When Europe unlocked a new region called the Americas, and everybody scrambled to take over the resources there. One issue: they needed workers for huge plantations and mines, as Native Americans died in the millions due to newfound diseases brought by Europeans. Of course, we already know that Africans were sold as slaves, but at first it was less to do about race and more about convenience. You couldn't send white locals because rich elites needed them to work in existing farms and jobs. Going to Asia or the Middle East was out of the question, as the Ottoman Empire in its peak acted as the roadblock.
And the Ottoman Empire did it themselves. If you were, as a white person, tried to do that against the Ottoman Empire, you would have probably ended up as a slave to the Ottoman Empire. So that wasn't an option. That wasn't a possibility.
On the other hand, African kingdoms conveniently already had existing slave trade routes with European kingdoms, making it easier to exploit and ship out.
Not only with European kingdoms, they already had it with them each other anyways. Remember, Africa did have slaves in Africa. Well, interesting. Jews from the Judea, ethnic Jews practice religionism, so it kind of is kind of two different things. Yeah, kind of, but sometimes not. Like you would if a German Jew wouldn't say that he is Jewish, you wouldn't be able to tell the difference. So it's kind of yes, but no. It depends.
To the Americas. Plantations and mines were quickly filled up with slaves, and they were dehumanized to maximize profits. To justify the horrible fate they imposed on the millions.
Not only to mention, the Black Kingdoms were already doing that, but he said that basically, with them having already routes.
Millions of people. Pseudoscience was used to paint black people as inherently inferior and whites as superior. Over time, this idea that white people were superior to other races would be embedded in laws and policies. I mean, imagine living during those times. Through education, racism would be taught like it was fact. Then, throughout life, you would see people of color in very low status jobs or slavery, which to you would become evidence, further reinforcing that education.
Yeah, that must have been quite ass. That must have been quite ass. Wouldn't wish that on anyone.
Education you had, not knowing that policies like segregation had systematically blocked people of color from opportunities. It was perceptions like this that justified discrimination, enlarging inside institutions and policies for centuries.
These just make normal dark steel. Oh no.
Wow, what a wonderful positive topic to really bring out our hopes for humanity as a whole, right? How does Asia put a spin on this Western classic? Now, if you look at Asia, it's a pretty big place, with many different cultures and histories. There's probably no single encompassing narrative for Asia as a whole, and I'm definitely not the guy that can give it to you. What I can give you are general ideas that make up racism in Asia today by taking a look at these guys, China and India. Now, for some of you, it might be difficult to believe, but it is undeniable that Chinese and Indian culture has been a huge influence to almost every country in Asia culturally and politically. These guys were building civilizations when everyone else were just hunter-gatherers, using the large and resource-rich geography to create cities where politics, technology, and culture advanced. Cities quickly developed into centers of economic and cultural exchange, where goods, ideas, and innovations would be exported to the entirety of Asia.
Interesting. Okay, I wonder where this is going. The history of China and India.
Through these ideas and innovations, China and India not only influenced borders and kingdoms, but how people lived, cooked, worked, and most importantly, how they thought. Chinese philosophies like Confucianism and Taoism, and Indian religions like Hinduism and Buddhism greatly influenced entire kingdoms, becoming the basis of societies over centuries. The thing is, there's always two sides to influence. It's like how I can eat tasty Yangzhou fried rice, but also have to deal with blood pudding stew, both influenced by Chinese cuisine. Likewise, the long-lasting Chinese and Indian culture have shaped ethics, family values, and social harmony, but also prejudices and racism. Let's start by what I think has impacted the ways we view other cultures here in Asia. Chinese ethnocentrism. The word ethnocentrism refers to the belief that the people, customs, and traditions of your own race or country are better than those of other races or countries. Therefore, Chinese ethnocentrism is the idea that Chinese culture is number one.
Which, yes, they do believe that. Yes, they do believe that. Most certainly. To be fair, wouldn't that? Yeah, that makes sense.
Instead of about being race and biology, it's more about a hierarchy of cultures. You see, Chinese culture is closely related to Confucianism. In the Confucianist perspective, the world is full of hierarchies, like father and son, elder and youth, or king and servant. Social order is only achieved when these hierarchies and their mutual responsibilities are respected. The upper is tasked with guidance and bringing order, and the under should follow and give respect. This is where Chinese ethnocentrism takes its roots. Their culture is superior to others, and they are destined to show them social order, but entitled to respect. Where's the evidence for all this? Well, it's right here in the name.
I mean, yeah. I mean, the world itself does work like that, right? We have hierarchies. There's no denial that the world works in hierarchies. So it isn't wrong. It isn't wrong. Now, should you believe your culture is better than another? In certain situations, right? If a culture, if a culture is okay with cannibalism, sure. If a culture is fine with grape, sure. Yeah. Then I do think that you could make the argument. But aside from that, it depends.
Not this one, but this one. This is 中国, which means China in Chinese. 中 here means middle, while 国 here means country. Put them together and it means middle country, roughly translating to the center of civilization. Yeah, they've been only doing it for around a short time of 3,000 years.
That's wild. Ooh, they do the same as the Americans, which means they have main character syndrome as well. Very interesting. They do have main character syndrome. Is father and son really a hierarchy, though? Yes. If you live in the house of your father, who has the say? More likely than not, it's your dad. So kinda yes. Father and son is a hierarchy. Family itself could be considered a hierarchy. In some constellations, right? You have like father, mother, children.
The first recorded instance of the word 中国 dates to around 1038 BC. The thing is, for most of history, China did have everything. The next technological innovations like gunpowder or printing, in China. The next new food dish, art, and architecture form, in China. New and exotic cultures from around the world, in China. Advanced political institutions like merit-based civil service and provincial administration systems, they're all in China. You get the picture, right? Here's where the problems start. The first problem was everybody wanted a piece of Chinese culture and their resource-rich trade. I mean, just imagine, you and your tribe of hunter-gatherers stumble upon a Chinese city. There's tall and fancy buildings. Everyone's actually wearing clothes. They eat tasty rice and cooked meat instead of raw fish and plants. Of course you'd want in. The second problem was, China didn't just let anybody have a piece of their sweet trade. You needed to be recognized as civilized first. China considered all cultures not aligned with their Confucianist beliefs to be inferior. This was reflected in the Chinese language.
Oh, we got a bunch of stuff here. Okay. Everyone that wasn't in support of Confucianism is basically a barbarian. is that? But I didn't vote for my father. That doesn't matter. I'm kidding around. Yeah, still that doesn't matter. If you live in your dad's house, you listen to your dad. Okay, that's interesting. I didn't know that. I didn't know that. Interesting. Main character syndrome.
With more than 20 different characters for the word savage or barbarian. The term
more than 20? I guess it depends on the context and then.
For barbarians was generally used to refer to non-Chinese ethnic groups living outside of China, while the term five barbarians was used to refer to ethnic groups living inside of China. Chinese dynasties also had strict tributary systems where surrounding states were expected to acknowledge China's superiority by bringing precious ornaments, regional specialties, or slaves as tribute. When it really came down to it, for most countries, you really only had two options. Option A, accept Chinese culture and its practices, or option B, develop a strong military to steal this culture. No matter what option you picked, you ended up being influenced by Chinese culture anyway. Picking option A meant that you had to integrate Chinese ideas and institutions into your domestic politics. Countries that took this route were Korea and Vietnam. Option B would usually lead to strong military-based ethnic groups to conquer large parts of China, creating conquest dynasties. Over time though, they more or less just ended up being assimilated into Chinese culture. Some examples are...
So essentially, if you were going to go to conquer out, you just ended up as a Chinese. That didn't matter. Interesting.
Jurchens during the Jin dynasty and Mongolians during the Yuan dynasty. As more parts of Chinese culture were integrated into domestic systems, ethnocentrism was embedded as well. If everybody generally agreed that China's culture was at the top, everybody wanted to argue that they were second best. Over time, many countries developed their own little versions of Chinese-style ethnocentrism, where they would adapt hierarchical views and barbarian labels of their own. Here are some examples. Vietnam viewed neighboring groups like Khmer and Champas as backward kingdoms. Japan also viewed its Shinto traditions as unique and superior than other Asians. And we all know how that turned out.
True. One thing he used the barbarian word right, but wrong too. It wasn't a word around the age of Confucius. It didn't use originally in China, but in Rome. Yeah, I guess I guess it's just the English translation of the word, right? But that is very true. You look at like what Japan was doing, or like World War II. That was in throughout history, and it was like, bro, how did you lose so much aura? What the heck? And now we're at cute anime waifus. How the tables have turned. About meaning on culture group people referred to barbarians, yeah.
Ethnocentrism may not be as straightly defined as race.
What a chart! What a chart! S male Saiyans, Freezer race, female Mahjins, A Namekians, B female Saiyan, C human male, D female human, F male Mahjins. The Dragon Ball analogy, it works.
Racism in the biological sense, but it has shaped perceptions for over thousands of years. Now, if Chinese ethnocentrism influenced how we view other cultures through prejudice and hierarchies, there's another concept that influenced the perspectives on how people are treated, especially those who are perceived as lower. The Indian caste system is a class division about as old as Chinese ethnocentrism, give or take a few hundred years. Basically, it separated society into four main groups like this, based on type of occupation.
So number 1 would be priests and teachers, number 2 would be warriors and rulers, number 3 would be farmers, traders, and merchants. Second lowest, well, lowest because they're laborers. They don't even get they get the lowest spot. Outcasts, street sweepers, latrine cleaners. They're so low they don't even get a spot.
Occupation and status. Initially, it was flexible, with opportunities to move between classes based on merit and skills. However, as society became more complex, society was divided into hundreds of rigid subcastes called jatis, focusing more on specific jobs, region, and birth. Over time, the caste dictated not only one's job, but also one's marriage prospects, food habits, and place in the social order. The caste wasn't just a social identity, but also a deeply entrenched system of religious purity based on the Hinduism worldview. In Hinduism, when we die, we don't go to heaven or hell, but instead are reborn. Thus, a person's class is decided based on the karma collected throughout their previous lives. Which meant that if your caste was
yeah, I'm cooked. I am getting reincarnated as a roach. There's no way out of here.
low, it was your fault. You lived a life collecting bad karma throughout your life cycles, and now you're going to be cleaning waste from toilets your entire life. Indians believed that in order to avoid this fate, you had to collect good karma. No, not by doing yoga and drinking smoothies, but by performing the duties of your own caste, and more importantly, by avoiding impurities like corpses, specific foods, and especially the lower caste. Probably the most famous is the Dalits, also referred to as the untouchables, existing beneath the caste structure. Treated as the most impure, higher castes would even bathe if a Dalit's shadow had touched them. These people were forcibly moved into main living areas, with access denied to public spaces. Due to this, most Dalits ended up being debt-trapped, forcibly working for almost nothing for generations. Also, law enforcement has historically refused to investigate.
Interesting. Nepal's systemic descent-based discrimination against Dalits needs urgent action. New report. State of Nepal falls short to predict Dalits' distrust in the police and justice system. Inadequate and insufficient measures to address systemic case-based discrimination. Culture of impunity. Dalit women and girls at risk. Well, yeah. Your karma be as Mongol slave in the next round. Holy sh! That'd be terrible. No, I don't want to end up like that. Thank you, please.
Investigate crimes against the Dalits, making them even more vulnerable to hate crimes and sexual exploitation. You kinda get the picture already, right? The ideas of rebirth and karma in Hinduism were used to legitimize the mistreatment and dehumanization of the lower caste. They're suffering right now. They all deserved it. It's all because of their previous lives. Don't expect help or change in this life. If they stay complacent and do their lowly jobs correctly, perhaps they could be reborn into a better caste. In this way, the mistreatment of others perceived as lower and their misfortune was closely linked with morality. There was no need for empathy, social justice, or
yeah, but it's kind of not racism, right? That's a class system, right? Not a racism thing, right?
Intervention. It was natural for prejudice to become
like how does that tie into racism? And I mean, this is social class
justice. The ideas of the Indian caste were spread to nearby countries in Southeast Asia such as Indonesia, Cambodia, and Thailand. However, it was actually the spread of Buddhism that passed these ideas all the way across Asia. Buddhism expanded throughout the entirety of Asia over a few centuries by Buddhist monks who traveled with merchant caravans on the Silk Road. Buddhism itself actually rejects caste systems, with its version of karma and rebirth concentrating more on moral self-conduct instead of lineage and purity. The problem was, as Buddhism spread to different countries, the ideas of karma and rebirth were perfect for elites to exploit as legitimacy for their rule. Some examples are the Chinese Tang and Song dynasties, Korea's Goryeo dynasty, and Japan's Edo period. With Buddhism, the influence of the caste system sneaked its way across Asia. Over centuries, the core ideas of mistreatment of social minorities being linked with morality were fused with indigenous hierarchies. So, let's sum up what we have right now. On one hand, ethnocentric thinking brought ideas of self-superiority through cultural hierarchy. On the other hand, we have caste systems that reinforced discrimination against groups deemed impure, primitive, or lower in status. And just like that, modern-day Asian racism was born. Well, not really. Traditional hierarchies did affect prejudice in Asia, but it was part of a complex social order that adjusted.
One is saying my culture is better, but culture is not race. And one is saying, you're lower class, so you're not worth anything.
And developed over centuries. Here's how it works. Hierarchies became more rigid and exploitative over time. Exploited classes would become angry about social problems, and massive conflicts would arise between these groups and the ruling class, resulting in significant damages. Hierarchies would be adjusted to be more flexible in order to prevent future conflicts. For example, in China, repeated peasant rebellions like the Yellow Turban Rebellion exposed the limits of rigid Confucian hierarchies, forcing later dynasties to adapt their policies, redistribute land, or reform the bureaucracy, not out of benevolence, but to preserve power. In other words, while traditional hierarchies were often oppressive, they were ultimately part of a cyclical system that allowed for adjustment and reform through internal pressure. You see, in order to break the cycle and create something powerful like Asian racism, you need something strong, something really racist, something really
racist. Something stronger, peak racist. I want to know.
White. Of course, it's the OG itself, Western colonialism. When the tea and bread people colonized parts of Asia, they needed an ideology that would justify their rule and exploitation over the massive Asian populations. For the European powers though, they've already done it before, and they knew it would work. Yep, they introduced Western racism straight into Asia, but with some little tweaks. Here's a general guide to how they pulled it off. First, the colonizers
didn't they get the Chinese addicted to drugs? Did I not? Is that what I remember? I think
started by hijacking the existing traditional hierarchies. Instead of building their own hierarchies, they put themselves at the top of existing ones through military force and political manipulation. After that, they introduced the idea of the white man's burden. The white man's burden was a form of white supremacy, where uncivilized locals needed the guidance of white people to become developed. It's a crazy form of gaslighting where they told the locals that colonizers were doing them.
Damn, the British were built different. Especially the British.
A favor. Using these racist ideas, they radicalized the existing hierarchies by using the already existing divides within the people. Certain castes or ethnicities were made to be middle managers for the colonizers and were rewarded for extorting and exploiting their own people. By doing so, the European powers made sure that the resentment from locals were redirected to these classes, creating severe discourse amongst the locals. Finally, institutions and colonies were created solely to boost efficiency of exploitation. With so much work experience in their hands, the European colonizers embedded institutions with hierarchies, reshaping local systems with policies like segregation, and making one's social castes set in stone with class censuses. Then, those institutions were dominated with middle management classes, incentivizing extortion for personal gain. This process ensured that racism would be here to stay. Even after independence, countries...
To be fair, they were cooked before. To be fair, with a caste system with like that, you were cooked before. Work experience, yeah. Yeah, that is correct. Opium, yeah. Yeah, okay, then I do remember it the right thing. They didn't have proper racism, though. It was more just a social system. My culture is better than yours. My standing is better than yours. We have that in Europe, though, too.
Countries inherited institutions still embedded with ideas of race, exploitation, and inequalities that still exist today. Inferiority was internalized inside colonies, with post-colonial ethnic tensions that fuels discrimination even to this day. But perhaps the most significant impact is that colonialism messed up existing standards for hierarchies. In culture or religion's place, the criteria for a higher rank was how developed or how Western your country appears to be. After all the colonialism gaslighting of guidance, many Asian countries rushed to prioritize national growth, where the means justified the ends. It's why appearance is so important here in Asia. Why countries try to build cities that show how modern they are. Why lookism is such a big social problem. Why people go on social media to try their best to imitate how rich and global they are.
I mean, we are a globalized society. Being global is the only option nowadays. That is rough. It wasn't that bad, though. It was just classifying people. If you're a warrior, got a warrior classification, blah blah. It wasn't set in stone. Apparently, according to him, it was set in stone. Basically, if you were born like a sewage cleaner or something like that, if you were born into the class where you were supposed to clean people's shit, you were cleaning people's shit for the rest of your life. Apparently, at least the way he said it.
Why there's so much TV programs about how amazing Asian culture is for white people. If you want to experience it, just go take a look at Korean Instagram or Chinese Douyin. The problem is, it's also why people will look at your race and assume how developed you are. It's why East Asian countries like China, South Korea, and Japan look down on people from Southeast Asia. It's why K-pop and anime are very popular in some countries in Southeast Asia, but they will look down on neighbors like Myanmar and Laos. It's why India looks down on darker skinned people with prejudice, but fantasizes about lighter skinned people. To put it simply, centuries of ethnocentrism and class divisions coupled.
I also have to say that the racism from black people towards Asians is also kind of built different as well. Like some of the stuff I've heard online is like diabolical. Like that is straight up vile. So that also happens. More classism than racism. It is more classism. It is a lot more classism. Or I don't know. Would culturism be a thing that you would call it like that? Because like you are worth less because of your culture. Yeah, that was during the colonialism. Before it was flexible, then it became this, and it kind of stayed. He explained the opposite. Before colonialism, it was already like that, where you like couldn't go up. A guy got beaten to death because he was at a wedding and considered in the worst case deemed unlucky. Goodness. It's just online people don't really matter. True, it was in India. Goodness. But yeah, it is very classist, if anything else.
Coupled with sudden radical changes through colonialism, resulted in a different form of racism in Asia, where people believe they are entitled to treat others who are perceived as underdeveloped. It's why if you're white, it's very rare to be on the receiving end of racism here, but more common if you're from Black or Southeast Asian countries. So the next.
True, I've seen tourists, popular influencers going to like, for example, India, and they were quite often approached. So yeah, that is true. That is true from what I can tell. Yeah, sure.
Next time you experience racism here in Asia, don't be surprised. It might be a little different from racism back home, but it's definitely here.
You and I are not so different. I mean, true. I mean, racism exists everywhere. It does exist everywhere. You're not safe from anywhere. It doesn't matter if it's Africa, Asia, America. You're kind of cooked everywhere. It doesn't matter. It really doesn't. You're just gonna get hit everywhere with it. Also doesn't matter what color you are, what you are. It doesn't matter. Somebody will make up a term and turn it into a slur. Though some slurs kind of aura. I must admit. I must admit, Bleach Demon does have aura. I'm not gonna lie. That is interesting. The racism back home, the wordings. Yes. Anyways, like, comment, and subscribe.